Let's see what the 5 best camera phones are under $500 right now. So we're starting with the OnePlus 7T. This phone honestly makes my best of list for under 500 most of the time, no matter what it is, whether it's the screen or the power or the camera. An overall great phone, a really good value phone, because you can get it like $450 now on Amazon. And I'll leave all the links below to these phones. So if you want to go and check them out and the prices in your country, all of the links I'll just put in the description. But in terms of the OnePlus 7T, it's just such a rounded phone. So the non-camera specs, 90Hz OLED, Snapdragon 855 Plus chipset, doesn't get beaten by any of these phones. Really good specs. Now we come to the important thing, the camera. A really good triple camera system, a main 48 megapixel sensor, which is the IMX586. They actually use that sensor in the OnePlus 8. So yeah, I mean, obviously they still like it. And in the OnePlus 8 Pro, it's actually the ultra wide camera. Still a good sensor in my opinion. You get the ultra wide and a telephoto as well. I think they call it 3 times. It's not really 3 times. It's more like 2 times. All in all, that is just a really solid setup. So there's no real bells and whistles, but the solid basics are there. And what's really important for this phone as well is you get the Snapdragon 855 Plus, which is a flagship SoC with a flagship ISP. That's the image signal processor. You get better image processing. You get a more powerful chipset that is more capable of taking images with dynamic range and better colors. It's really important with chipsets to work in line with the camera hardware. There's no point having really great camera hardware and a mid or budget range processor. It just won't be able to process images as good as a phone with a flagship SoC. So as an all-in-all phone, the OnePlus 7T still, in my opinion, almost a year later, is rocking pretty much a really good setup. You do get 4K video recording on the OnePlus 7T, definitely a solid spec. The ultra-wide and the zoom camera, I would say there is a slightly noticeable difference in quality when you get out. So that main image sensor, they put a lot of work into that. The colors, the dynamic range, also in video, it's definitely a step above the other two. So it's just something to keep in mind. That even goes for the OnePlus 8 Pro though, the brand new one about to get replaced maybe. As soon as you go into the zoom camera, you can just tell the colors fall apart a little bit and everything compared to the main camera. So it's not like the OnePlus 7T is any different to the OnePlus 8 Pro, but obviously just a different level. Coming on to the Galaxy A71, I think this is just a really great mid-range phone in general. Cameras are good, and also you do get a 5G version. So depending on which country you're in, there's a 5G version, and also the price does differ. It is actually around $500 in some places, and again, just check the link below. It will go through to your country to see how much it is. This one uses a Snapdragon 730 or depending on your region, 730G. But anyway, it's a mid-range chipset. So it's already lagging behind the OnePlus 7T in terms of the chipset. But the cameras, I don't think there's massively a difference. You get a main image sensor, which is high megapixel, actually 64 megapixels. You get an ultra wide at 12 megapixels, which is a good performer. And then you get a macro and a depth sensor, which are not massively useful for me. Macro may be useful for you though. The depth sensor is a nice addition, not always necessary, but just gives you a quad camera with really 2 main shooters. You get 960 frames a second slow-mo, if that's important for you, 4K video recording, which I think is a solid spec these days, and a 32 megapixel selfie camera. Don't be fooled by the 32 megapixels. Megapixels don't really count too much on selfie cameras overall. You may want them, but when it comes to selfie cameras, definitely dynamic range and natural colors, I think are more important anyway, and on the Samsung, they're generally quite good. I would say that the colors in general on the selfie camera are a little bit more natural. That's in my opinion anyway, compared to maybe some of the Chinese phones like the OnePlus and Xiaomi phones, which we'll get on into in a second. But in terms of natural colors, I think it just suits me a little bit more. Also with the 5G version on this one, the chipset changes. So rather than the Snapdragon 730, you get the Exynos 980, which is a Samsung chipset. You are going to be future-proofed a little bit. When it comes to the camera, in terms of dynamic range and image processing, it's going to be pretty much the same. Moving on anyway is my next one, and this is another phone that I really add in most mid-range smartphone lists, which is the Xiaomi Mi Note 10 or possibly the Mi Note 10 Lite. Again, depending on which country you're in, some of them have international versions and some don't. You can just check Amazon to see if it's available for you. This one comes in around $350 or $400 depending on which of the phones. And they are different. The camera setup's really different. So on the Mi Note 10, you have a 108 megapixel main image sensor and then 2 zoom cameras giving you a really long zoom length. You also get a 20 megapixel ultra wide, 4K video recording and 240 frames a second in full HD and then 960 frames a second in 720p. So typical Xiaomi fashion, throw everything at a phone, all the lenses, all the specs, all the hardware in that phone. With the Lite version, the camera really does change completely. You get a 64 megapixel main image sensor, not 108. You also get an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and then you get a macro and a depth. So you don't get that long zoom range that you get in the Big Brother. In terms of the main image sensor, 108 megapixels versus 64 in smartphones, I don't think it makes a massive difference. And I've used both of these phones, and I think the main image sensor on both actually gives a really good result. I really didn't miss those extra pixels up to 108. 64 is enough in terms of megapixels for me. When it comes to video, maybe prefer the Samsung and a couple of other phones, which I've yet to mention. So let's get into one of the next ones, which is the iPhone SE. And this is another phone which matches the criteria when it comes to the camera and the price. Definitely not for everyone because of that design though. So in contrast to Xiaomi, which throws everything at a phone in terms of specs and camera hardware, this thing has one camera on the back. So no ultra wide, no zoom cameras, but you get one of the best single shooters on pretty much any smartphone and one of the best processors of pretty much any smartphone in this phone for way under $500. So I guess the question is for this one, do you really need that ultra wide? Do you need a slightly wider angle as a secondary camera? Do you need any zoom range? Do you need a macro sensor? Do you need a depth sensor? Or is that one image sensor and the quality from that actually enough? So when it comes to images, colors, dynamic range, the look and feel of it, the style of it, iPhone for me is right up there. Even this phone, the iPhone SE, for a lot of people, you're just going to dismiss this phone. It's not going to be for you. But for a lot of people who really just don't care about that, they actually want a small phone with a button on the front. A lot of people want that and like that. And if that is for you, then you can rest assured you're getting one of the best single cameras out there. Finally, Google actually released this phone. We've been waiting for it all year, basically. It was supposed to come out at the start of the year, and then everything happened. So that was put off. They put it off a couple more times. Finally, it is out though. Just at $350 this phone as well, which is amazing value, I think, overall for the phone. So you just get one camera back there. So no ultra wide, no zoom cameras, no depth sensors, but Pixel. It is one of the best camera phones out there in terms of photo. Really amazing colors, natural depth, dynamic range, just amazing looking images. This has the Snapdragon 730, so the same as the Xiaomi Mi Note 10 and Mi Note 10 Lite, and also the A71. So in terms of the processors between those three phones, none of them are going to be outperforming any of the others. So certainly it does come down to really the camera, the design, the screen, which one is for you. Which is better out of the iPhone and the Pixel? Again, it's a super hard choice. And I guess this one's probably going to be down to which phone you have already. So if you're an Android or an iPhone user. Also worth mentioning that Google are about to release the Pixel 4a 5G and Pixel 5, which should have some upgrades over the Pixel 4a. So they should have dual cameras instead of just one. Both of those apparently with an ultra wide camera. And also both of those using the Snapdragon 765G, which is the upgrade to the 730G. Also, though, the price is going to be upgraded above $500 for those. So depending on your budget, you may want to just go for this one and even get a case with it, or maybe wait for the others and maybe you want to splash out on those. All good smartphones in my opinion, not just the cameras, but just the phones in general. And as I said, with camera smartphone videos, a ton of this is just going to be down to personal preference, because when it comes to video and photo, it's just what you like and what you look at. You can only compare specs so much. It's the images. As long as you like them, then that's the right phone for you. Anyway, I hope this one was helpful to give you 5 that I like. Let me know all of your opinions in the comments as always. That's it for this one though. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.